Chapter 4 Loki's Request, a Debt Repaid. The fire burned low in Loki's sanctuary, casting golden light against the stone walls. The ranger was asleep. Truly asleep. For the first time in far too long, her breath steady. Her presence a quiet certainty in the space they had made their own. Loki sat by the hearth, swirling a goblet of Asgardian wine, his gaze unreadable. His mind was not at ease. Because something was coming. He could feel it. And if he could feel it, then so too could Strange. That meant time was short, which meant he needed to ensure that she was safe. And for that, he needed someone he never expected to ask for anything. Someone who had once hated him. Someone whose mind he had once twisted, whose will he had stolen, whose very soul he had bent to his own whims. But that Loki was dead. And this one owed a debt. So, with a quiet hum of ancient magic, Loki sent his message into the void. And Clint Barton, former assassin, former enemy, and now an ally forged in reluctant trust, received it. The Archer and the God, a pact unspoken. Clint sat alone in his safe house, nursing a cup of coffee, when the flickering green shimmer of magic filled the dimly lit room. He sighed heavily. God damn it. Ah, Barton, ever the poet. Loki's voice was smooth, amused, and dangerously calm. Clint exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. Please tell me you're not here to kill me, because if you are, at least let me finish my coffee first. If I wanted you dead, I would have at least been creative about it. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Clint leaned back, studying him warily. So what do you want? Loki hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, and Clint saw it. The moment stretched between them, then, finally, I need you to watch over someone for me. Clint blinked. Come again? You heard me, Barton. Loki's voice was measured, even, but there was something beneath it, something that was not arrogance, nor manipulation. Something real. I must leave, I do not know for how long. Loki's gaze flickered, just slightly to the side, as if checking for something unseen. And she... He stopped himself. Clint caught it immediately. She? Do not press. Loki's voice had an edge now, warning. Clint let out a slow exhale, his mind piecing together the puzzle. The Ranger. Loki's eyes flicked back to him sharply, and for the first time in his life, Clint saw something that he had never expected in those green depths. Not amusement, not mockery, not manipulation. Sincerity. Loki trusted him. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Clint ran a hand over his face, letting out a slow chuckle. You really are different now, aren't you? Loki's smirk was sharp, but it did not reach his eyes. You have no idea. A beat of silence. Then Clint sighed, shaking his head. Fine, I'll keep an eye on her. Loki tilted his head. Without hesitation. Oh, there's plenty of hesitation. Clint rolled his shoulders. But I've seen what happens when someone really pisses you off, so let's just say I'd rather keep her safe than deal with that. Loki smirked. A wise decision. A sorcerer's discovery. A darkness older than time. Kamar-Taj had always been a place of learning, of power, of forces both known and unknown. And deep beneath its halls, Stephen Strange had found something. Something buried. something forgotten, something that should have never been touched. The relic was small, unassuming, almost insignificant. A simple black stone, no larger than a coin, sitting in the heart of an ancient altar, beneath the sanctum's deepest chamber. But the moment Strange had touched it, everything changed. The room had bent around him, the air had shattered, space fractured like glass, reality trembling, and the whispers had begun. It spoke of the first sorcerer. It spoke of the forgotten war. It spoke of something that had existed before time itself, something that had been buried before the first gods had drawn breath. And now it had been found. Strange barely managed to contain the ripple of destruction before it could spread. But it was too late, because the whispers had already awoken something else. Something waiting, something watching. And Stephen Strange knew with absolute certainty that there was only one other person who could help him stop it. One person who understood magic older than time. One person who had danced at the edge of chaos itself and lived to tell the tale. One person he never wanted to owe anything to again. Loki. The Archer in the Shadows. Clint Barton was many things. A former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, an Avenger, a survivor, a damn good archer. But invisible? Not so much. Especially not here. Loki's sanctuary was unnerving, to say the least. It was quiet. Too quiet for someone who had spent his life in the chaos of war zones, city streets, and battlefields. The air carried a hum of magic, subtle but ever present, like the world itself was watching. And then there was her, the ranger. He had expected her to be sleeping. That's what Loki had told him. Watch over her, and sure she's safe. And yet, here she was. Standing in front of him, 2 cups of coffee in her hands, her gaze sharp with amusement. How long are you going to try blending into your surroundings, Clint? She raised a brow, smirking as she set one of the cups down on a nearby rock. I can see you as clearly as if you were the Hulk wearing a pink princess costume. Clint sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Damn it. The Dance of Words. He stepped out from where he had been watching, leaning against a tree just at the edge of the sanctuary's entrance. Was worth a shot, he muttered, walking up and picking up the cup. He eyed her over the rim as he took a sip. So, what gave me away? The ranger tilted her head. You mean aside from the fact that I always know when I'm being watched? Clint smirked. Yeah, aside from that. She took a slow sip of her own coffee before answering. You breathe like someone's trying not to breathe, and you shift your weight in the exact same rhythm every 40 seconds. That's a trained habit. Clint blinked. You counted? I got bored, she shrugged. So what are you doing here exactly? I doubt you just decided to take a nature's retreat. Clint sighed heavily. Look, I'm not exactly thrilled about this either. But Loki asked me to keep an eye on you while he's off dealing with whatever magical nightmare is threatening to unravel reality this time. Her smirk faltered just slightly. Loki asked you? Yeah. She studied him for a long moment, and Clint could practically feel the weight of her assessment. Then she laughed. Clint frowned. Okay, that is not the reaction I was expecting. The ranger grinned. I just find it hilarious that Loki, of all people, trusts you with anything remotely important. Clint scoffed, taking another sip of coffee. Yeah, well, he and I have history. Oh, I'm aware. Her voice was smooth, but there was a flicker of something else behind her gaze. Curiosity. Clint exhaled. And before you ask, no, I don't get it either. He gave her a sideways glance. But I figure if Loki is willing to trust me, I'd be a real idiot to throw that away. Her expression softened just a fraction. That's surprisingly wise for you, Barton. Don't get used to it. The terms of truce. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both sipping their coffee. And then the ranger smirked again. So what now? Are you just going to stand outside and pretend to be a guardian statue? Clint narrowed his eyes. I could do that. You could try. I could set up a perimeter. Unnecessary. I could. Or you could come inside and have breakfast like a normal person, instead of lurking in the woods like some sort of cryptid. Clint sighed heavily. You're going to make this difficult, aren't you? The ranger grinned. You have no idea. Clint huffed, shaking his head. Fine, but if Loki shows up and stabs me for sitting in his chair, I'm blaming you. Deal. And with that, the two unlikely allies walked inside, leaving the morning air behind, one step closer to understanding each other, and one step further into whatever madness awaited them next. The darkness beneath Kamar-Taj. Kamar-Taj was a sanctuary of knowledge, a place where sorcerers trained their minds, honed their power, and studied the forces that governed the universe. But tonight it was a tomb of whispers. Stephen Strange stood at the heart of the underground chamber, the flickering light of conjured sigils casting eerie shadows against the stone walls. Before him, on a pedestal of obsidian black rock, sat the artifact. Small, unassuming, and yet it felt wrong, like it should not exist, like it had been pulled from a time before time. The stone pulsed faintly, its surface like a reflection of a starless void. Strange had seen many things, things that defied reason, things that banned reality, things that men were never meant to wield. But this was different, because when he had touched it, the voices had begun. The whispers of the forgotten. You are not ready. He is awakening. He will come. The voices slithered through the air, not loud, not screaming, just present. 1,000 whispers lay at atop one another, never quite clear enough to be fully understood. Strange clenched his jaw, forcing his breathing to remain steady. He had contained it, barely. His magic still circled the artifact in shimmering golden rings, restraining the thing from spreading whatever influence it carried. But something had changed. The moment he had touched it, the magic of Kamar-Taj had shifted, like the very walls of reality had trembled for just a fraction of a second. Something had noticed. And now it was only a matter of time. Strange exhaled slowly, dragging a hand down his face. Great, another apocalyptic threat before breakfast. He turned away from the artifact, beginning to pace. His mind raced, trying to place it, to categorize what he was dealing with. But no matter how far he searched, through the tomes of the Vishanti, through the knowledge left behind by the Ancient One, through even the forbidden text, there was nothing, no record of such an object, no trace of its origin. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The call no one wants to make. Strange stopped pacing. His fingers flexed at his sides. He knew what he had to do, and he hated it. There were very few people in the universe who had a deep enough knowledge of primal, ancient magic to even begin to comprehend what he was dealing with. One was Wong, but even he was limited to the teaching of Kamatage. Another was Scarlet Witch, but, well, that left exactly one other person. A pain in the ass, a nightmare in green and gold, a wild card in every sense of the word. Strange sighed heavily, pressing his fingers to his temple. Damn it, Loki. He reached out, forming a complex sigil in the air. One designed specifically to send a message across realms, across worlds, directly to one specific recipient. The air crackled with golden light, and Strange exhaled slowly before speaking the words that would send the message across the void. Loki, we have a problem. A pause. Then, with just a little bitterness, and I need your help. The trickster answers. The moment the spell left Strange's lips, the air shifted, and not because of the spell. It was something else. The pressure in the space around him, like the world itself had reacted, and then green light. A swirling shimmer of magic twisted into the space just beyond the pedestal, forming a shape, a presence. A figure that stood there as if he had, always, meant to arrive at that exact moment. And there he was. Loki. His arms were folded, his expression far too smug, and Strange immediately regretted everything. Loki arched a brow. Strange, he mused, his tone silken with amusement. What an unexpected delight. Strange scowled. I swear to God, if you say I told you so, I will. Loki interrupted, stepping forward, his emerald gaze flickering to the artifact. Before we get into your delightful little threats, perhaps you should tell me what exactly you have disturbed. Strange hesitated. Loki tilted his head, a slow smirk curling his lips. Oh, Strange, you look concerned? Strange exhaled sharply. That's because I am. Loki's smirk vanished, and that was how Strange knew things were about to get much worse. The Whispering Dark. Loki's smirk was gone. That alone was enough to make every nerve in Strange's body tense. The god of mischief never lost his smirk. Not when he was playing a game, not when he was standing before an enemy, not even before the world was quite literally collapsing around him. And yet, as he looked at the artifact, stared at it, unblinking, as if seeing something no one else could, his expression darkened. Something cold settled in the room. Strange felt it too. An instinct, something in his bones that told him they had gone too far. Loki exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing just slightly. You touched it. It wasn't a question. Strange crossed his arms, forcing himself to remain calm. Yeah, and? Loki's gaze flicked to him, something unreadable in his expression. And now it has found you. The Forgotten One. The word settled into the air like a curse. Strange's jaw clenched. What does that mean? Loki finally looked away from the artifact, his fingers twitching, as if resisting the urge to reach for it. There are things in this universe, Loki said quietly, older than time itself, older than gods, older than magic as we understand it. Strange frowned. I have studied the oldest records of Kamatage, the Celestials, even the Vishanti. If this thing was as ancient as you're implying, it would have been... It was not recorded. The way Loki said it, so certain, so absolute, made Strange pause. Why? Loki's gaze flickered, his voice quieter now. Because it was meant to be forgotten. Stranger's blood ran cold. It has found you. Strange took a step closer to the pedestal. Loki, what the hell is this thing? Loki didn't answer. His eyes remained locked onto Strange, studying him, assessing him. And that was when Strange felt it. A shift. Something beneath his skin. Like an echo of something that was not his own. A whisper. So soft, so distant. Mine. Strange inhaled sharply, his fingers twitching, as if something had just brushed against the edges of his mind. What? It has already begun, Loki murmured. Stranger's pulse pounded in his ears. What has begun? Loki's gaze was sharp, knowing, ancient. It did not wake because it was found. A beat of silence. Then it woke because you touched it. The infection of the unseen. Strange staggered back a step. No, that wasn't possible. He had contained it. He had sealed it with magic the moment he had realized something was wrong. This wasn't how magic worked. Was it? Don't be ridiculous, Strange snapped, forcing himself back into control. It's bound. I put wards around it. It's not spreading. You do not understand, Loki interrupted, his voice too calm, too quiet. Then explain it to me, Strange growled. Loki tilted his head. Would you like the truth, Strange? Strange clenched his fists. I wouldn't have asked for your help if I didn't. Loki exhaled, looking almost sympathetic. Then, it is not coming for you, Sorcerer Supreme. Strange frowned. Then what? It's coming from you. The room plunged into silence. The shadow and the mirror. The moment the words left Loki's lips, Strange felt it. Not an attack, not an invasion, a presence. Inside him, like something's watching. Something waiting. Something that had been asleep for aeons, and now, because of him, it had opened its eyes. His breath hitched. Loki. Loki stepped forward, slow, deliberate, his voice dangerously calm. Tell me, Strange. Strange's chest felt tight. Something pressing just beneath his ribs, curling in the edges of his vision. Loki's gaze bore into him. When was the last time you looked in a mirror? A pulse echoed in his skull. Strange inhaled sharply, his fingers twitching, his thoughts fracturing for just a moment. And for the briefest second, his reflection did not move. The breaking point. Strange's heart slammed against his ribs, his breath caught just for a second, just a flicker. Before he reasserted control, forcing his mind to focus, to fight. He looked back at Loki, his voice steady, but barely. What is happening to me? Loki's gaze did not waver. You have been marked, Strange. His words felt heavier than they should have. Strange's jaw clenched. Marked by what? Loki's expression was unreadable. Something that should never have been woken. A pause, then softer. And now it is inside you. The truth Loki cannot speak. The silence between them stretched, thick, heavy, unrelenting. Stranger's pulse pounded, the weight of Loki's words settling into his chest like a slowly tightening noose. You have been marked. It is inside you. No. That wasn't possible. Magic could corrupt, it could twist and taint, and it could alter and bend. But it did not do this. Did it? Strange clenched his fists, jaw tightening. Enough riddles, Loki. Loki tilted his head, studying him, his expression unreadable. Ah, but you misunderstand, Strange. His voice was smooth, too smooth. This is not a riddle. This is a mercy. Mercy? Strange almost laughed, though there was nothing humorous in it. You call this mercy? Loki took a slow step forward. I could tell you everything, he murmured, but the moment I do, you will be lost. A chill slithered down Strange's spine. His hard-earned, sharpened instincts told him Loki wasn't lying. And that was worse than any trickery he could have expected. The chains of silence. Loki did know. Not just a piece of the puzzle, not just some fragment of forgotten lore. He knew exactly what was happening, exactly what had been waiting, exactly why it had stirred, and exactly why he could not speak its name. Because to name it, to acknowledge it, was to give it power. And Strange was already marked. If he said its name, if he even hinted at the depth of what was unfolding, it would wake fully. Not in some distant realm, not in the void beyond time, but inside Stephen Strange himself. Loki inhaled slowly, measuring his words before he spoke again. You need to listen to me carefully, Strange. His voice had changed. Gone was the amusement, the arrogance, the ever-present mischief. In its place was something rare, something dangerous, something like fear. This thing, the one that now watches from beneath your skin. Loki's voice lowered, dark, careful. It was never meant to be found. Strange forces himself to breathe evenly. Then what is it? Loki hesitated. Then, an old god. The words hit like thunder, rippling through the air. The very room seemed to flinch at their weight. A god that should not be. Strange went still. Impossible. His voice was quiet but sharp. I've studied the old gods, the Vishanti, the elder gods, the celestials, the primordial forces. And yet, Loki interrupted, his emerald eyes dark, you have never heard of this one. Strange stared at him, and deep down he already knew what Loki was about to say. Because it was erased. Loki nodded slowly. Not sealed, not bound, not cast into some prison between realms. His gaze flickered, just slightly, to the artifact, its black surface pulsing faintly, as if it were breathing. It was erased from history, from time itself, from memory, from existence. A slow exhale. And yet, Loki murmured, tilting his head, you found it. Strange's stomach turned. Not found, his fingers curled into his palm. It found me. Loki's expression did not change. Exactly. The first of its kind. Strange had spent years studying the impossible. He had battled Dormammu in the Dark Dimension. He had walked through time, defied fate, unraveled the very fabric of what should be possible. But this was something else. He stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, forcing his mind to work. You said it was erased from history. By who? Loki's gaze flickered. Then, quietly, by the gods themselves. The weight of that sentence settled like an earthquake. Strange swallowed hard. Why? A long pause, then, because it was the first. Strange blinked. The first what? Loki's jaw tightened just slightly. The first god. Silence. Strange's pulse pounded in his ears. That's not possible. Loki let out a quiet breath. And yet, here we are. The awakening begins. The shadows in the room seemed deeper now, and the whispers in the air thicker. Something called in the back of Strange's mind, something he could not shake. Mine. His fingers twitched, his breath staggered. Loki noticed immediately. Strange. The sorcerer lifted his gaze, something flickering behind his eyes that did not belong. Loki stepped forward. You need to control this, now. Strange exhaled sharply, forcing himself back into focus. I am in control. Are you? Loki's voice was low, almost testing. A pause. Then, look at your hands. Strange did not want to look. He already felt it. But he did. And when he saw them, his breath caught. Because his fingertips were darkening, not burnt, not stained, but as if the void itself was creeping into his skin, and if he was already being rewritten. And deep within his mind, a voice not his own whispered, I see you. The first god stirs. The shadows coiled around the edges of the room, thick and whispering, curling like unseen tendrils that pressing against the fabric of reality itself. The air was wrong, not just heavy, not just dark. It was shifting, changing, like the very concept of space was bending around him. Strange. Loki saw it, felt it. The hum of power that was not his own, but something deeper, something that slithered beneath the skin of the universe, brushing against the threads of existence as if testing how easily they could be unwoven. And it was inside Strange now. The mark had settled, and something was waking. The sorcerer's struggle. Strange clenched his jaw, forcing his breathing to stay even, his pulse steady, but he could feel it. A presence. Not pushing, not pulling, simply watching, waiting. I see you. The whisper called in the back of his mind, low and languid, like something stretching for the first time in eons, tasting the power in his veins. His fingers twitched, the darkness at his fingertips flickering, crawling up towards his wrists. No, no! He was Sorcerer Supreme. He had mastered the mystic arts. He had bent time, defied fate, stood against Dormammu himself. He would not be undone. His eyes snapped up to Loki. Fix it! Loki tilted his head. You assume it can be fixed. A muscle in Strange's jaw twitched. Don't play with me, Loki. Loki chuckled, low, almost pitying. Strange, he murmured, stepping forward, his voice dropping into something almost gentle. This is not a game. Strange's breath hitched. Loki's gaze flickered to his hands, the creeping blackness, the way the lines of his skin were beginning to blur, like reality itself was starting to rewrite him. This is the beginning, Loki continued, his voice quiet, measured. And once something has begun, he let the sentence linger. Strange exhaled sharply. You're telling me I can't stop this? Loki's smirk was gone. I'm telling you it has already started. The silence stretched between them. Then the world rippled, a pulse, not from the artifact, from Strange. It hungers. Loki felt it first. The way the air shuddered around them. The way the very fabric of space trembled, not violently, not chaotically, but in anticipation. Something was shifting. Something was recognizing. Something was waking up. And Loki knew what it meant. Strange, Loki said carefully. You need to get control of yourself. Strange's breathing was sharper now, shallower, his fingers clenching as if he fought something unseen. He could feel it settling in his bones. A force that was not his own. A presence that was older than time, stretching into his very essence, testing, learning, adapting, not attacking, not corrupting, simply tasting. Ah, you will do nicely. Strange's pulse slammed against his ribs. No, no! His hand flew up, gold magic crackling between his fingers as he tried to burn it out, cast it out, fight it off. But nothing happened. The magic flared, but the creeping black did not retreat. It did not fight back. It simply stayed, settled, rooted, and laughed. Loki's warning. Loki moved fast, faster than Strange expected, faster than he should have been able to. A flick of his wrist, a pulse of emerald light, and suddenly the world snapped back into focus. Strange inhaled sharply, like he had just broken to the surface after nearly drowning, his vision blurring as he struggled to regain control. The dark lines creeping along his hands halted, but they did not retreat. He swallowed, dragging a trembling hand down his face. What the hell was that? Loki watched him carefully. That was the first taste. Strange clenched his teeth. It's trying to take me. Loki's head tilted slightly. No. A flicker of confusion flashed through Strange's expression. Then what? It is choosing you. A beat of silence. Then, cold realization sank into Strange's ribs. This wasn't a possession. It wasn't an attack. It was a bond. Something ancient, deliberate, methodical. Something older than time had words for. Loki took a step forward, voice lowering. Do you understand now, Sorcerer Supreme? Strange's fingers twitched. Understand what? Loki exhaled. This is not a battle you can fight. Strange's breath was shallow. Then what do I do? Loki's expression was impossible to read. Then you learn how to survive it. The road ahead. Strange is no longer just Stephen Strange. Something had claimed him. Not as prey, not as an enemy, but as a vessel. And Loki knows exactly what that means. But how much can he reveal? How much dare he say? Because if he tells Strange the whole truth, then the first god will finally wake, and the world will never be the same. The Sorcerer's Defiance. Stephen Strange was many things. A surgeon, a sorcerer, a protector of reality itself. But above all else, he was stubborn. He had clawed his way back from ruin before, from the shattered remains of his hands, from the brink of oblivion, from battles that had rewritten the fate of the universe itself. And if this thing, this ancient lurking force, thought it could claim him without a fight, It was dead wrong. The Last Stand of Stephen Strange. No. Loki arched a brow, folding his arms. No. I don't accept this. Strange's voice was sharp, his breathing uneven, but his eyes were fierce. You said this isn't a battle I can fight. I don't care. Loki sighed, tilting his head slightly. How utterly predictable. This is my mind. Strange's fingers curled, magic flickering against his skin like a warning, golden light crackling as he forced himself to push back against the thing coiling inside him. And I will not let it take me. Loki's smirk flickered, but there was something else in his gaze now. Something like recognition. Like he had seen this before. And he had. Not with Strange. With himself. The god of lies knows the truth. Loki knew this game. He had lived it. Had felt it. The slow unraveling of self. The creeping tendrils of something that did not belong. Whispering in the back of his mind. Rewriting his thoughts before he even knew they had changed. And he had learned the truth. This was not a battle won through defiance. This was not a war where victory meant resistance. No. This was a game of survival. And the first rule of survival? You do not fight the storm. You learn to bend with the wind. The choice that cannot be made. Strange, Loki said carefully. I admire your stubbornness. Then help me. Strange's eyes burned with frustration, with fear, with the kind of fury that only came from standing on the edge of losing yourself. Tell me how to get rid of it. Loki hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. But Strange saw it. You know something. His voice dropped dangerously sharp. Tell me. Loki exhaled, rubbing his fingers together slowly, thoughtfully. You think knowledge will save you. It always has before. Loki chuckled darkly. Then this will be the exception that finally humbles you. Strange's eyes narrowed. Loki. You do not get to know everything, Strange. Strange stilled. There was something different in Loki's tone now. Something serious. Something dangerous. Loki's green eyes met his. Steady, unwavering. Because if I tell you the truth, a slow, deliberate pause, then it will hear me. The forbidden truth. The words hit like a crack of thunder. Strange felt his breath catch, felt the unseen weight of something watching, something waiting, something pressing against the edges of reality like a thing waiting to be acknowledged. And Loki knew. Because the moment he said the wrong words, the moment he gave Strange the name, the knowledge, the shape of what had claimed him, it would wake, not slowly, not subtly, but fully. And Strange would no longer be just Strange. Loki tilted his head, his smirk returning, but it was sharp now, cold, purposeful. So choose, Sorcerer Supreme. His voice was soft, but heavy. Do you want knowledge? A pause. Or do you want to survive? The moment that decides everything. Strange's mind raced. He wanted to demand answers. He wanted to rip them from Loki's throat if he had to. But he wasn't a fool. Something had shifted in the air the moment Loki had hesitated. Something was listening. And if he asked the wrong question, if Loki gave the wrong answer, Then this game would be over before it had even begun. Strange took a slow breath. Then what do I do? Loki watched him. Then, with the smallest smirk, finally, the right question. The trickster's gamble. Loki's smirk was subtle, barely there. But Strange saw it, and that was enough to make every nerve in his body tighten. Because of course, Loki had known more than he let on. Of course he had kept something hidden, something waiting, something that Strange had not seen until now. Loki was a liar, a trickster, a fraud. But was he really? Because if Loki was smiling at a time like this, then that meant he had already planned for what comes next. And that was terrifying. The first god breaks through. The whispers sharpened, not soft, not slithering. This time they rippled through the air like shattered glass, a hum vibrating deep in Strange's bones, his vision blurring at the edges as something pushed past the veil. Something ancient, something that should not be, something waking. You see now. The voice was not a whisper anymore. It was a presence. It was a weight pressing down on Strange's very existence, on the air itself, on the walls of Kamar-Taj that had never known such power before. It was here. It was real. And it had found him. And it was stepping through. The air rippled as reality shuddered, a shape forming, not solid, not entirely there, but vast. Stretching past dimension, past time, past anything Strange could comprehend. And it was looking at him. Yes, you will do. A pulse, a beat of silence. And then Loki moved. The trickster's power. Loki did not hesitate. A flick of his wrist, a pulse of magic so old, so pure, that it did not look like his usual power. And suddenly, the space around them bent. Not like a shield, not like an attack, but like a countermeasure. A force equal to what had just stepped into the room. And that should not have been possible. Strange gasped as he was forced back into himself, the pressure lifting, the whispers dissolving, and for the first time since he had been marked, the first god faltered. Not because of Strange, not because of anything he had done, but because of Loki. The power of a forgotten bond. Strange staggered, his vision still swimming, his pulse pounding. But Loki was calm, steady. His magic held against the weight of the first god's presence, matched it, shaped itself against it, like something that should not exist, yet did. Something new, something old, something that did not belong to Loki alone. Strange saw it now. Saw the way Loki's magic had shifted. This wasn't just a seething emerald of Asgardian power. It wasn't just a chaotic mischief that had always followed him like a second skin. It was something deeper, something woven into his very being. Something that pulls with a different kind of bond. A bond not meant for him alone. And then, Strange understood. The bond that should not be. The protection spell. The one Loki had placed upon the Ranger. It had been perfect, hidden, untouchable. But magic, true, ancient magic, never came without a cost. And Loki, so smug, so certain of his own skill, had not realized the price until now. He had woven himself into it, not just as a guardian, not just as a tether, but a counterbalance. And now when the first god tried to break through, to reshape Strange into something new, it had been met with resistance. Because Loki had already rewritten the roles. He had unknowingly become something else. Something that could challenge the first god itself. And for the first time in its endless existence, it hesitated. The trickster's choice. Loki's smirk returned slowly, a dangerous, knowing thing. He turned his gaze to Strange, who was still recovering from what had just happened, and said, far too smoothly, "You didn't actually think I came here unprepared, did you?" Strange clenched his jaw, forcing himself to breathe evenly. What the hell was that? Loki's eyes flickered, green and gold light still crackling at his fingertips. "A reminder," he murmured, "that I do not play by the same rules as you do, Strange." His gaze shifted, just slightly, toward the fractured space where the first god had tried to push through. It was still watching, still there, but it had stopped advancing. Because now it was assessing. Now it had seen something it did not expect. And Loki had its attention. The power Loki never meant to have. Strange wiped a hand across his face, his mind racing. Loki had not countered the first god. He had not banished it, or sealed it, or destroyed it. But he had done something far more dangerous. He made it hesitate. And if something that old, that powerful, that erased from existence itself was uncertain of what it was facing, that meant Loki was an unknown variable. That meant he had power that had not existed before. Power that was not entirely his own. Strange exhaled sharply. "Loki, what did you do?" Loki's smirk was calculated now, careful. Because he knew the answer now, knew why the magic had responded, knew what had changed. And deep in his bones he realized that he had become something else entirely. Because the spell he had woven into the ranger had done more than protect her. It had changed him. And now, the first god wanted to know why. The cost of power. Loki could feel it now, the hum beneath his skin, the pulse of something ancient, something woven into him without his knowing. It wasn't Asgardian magic, it wasn't trickery, it was pure balance. A force so absolute, so deliberate, that even the first god hesitated before stepping further. And now it watched him, waiting, testing, because even it did not know the full extent of what had been awakened. But Loki did. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Loki was afraid. Not for himself, but for her. Because the power had not come from nowhere. It had not simply appeared within him. It had been forged. And if it was used, if he unleashed it fully, it would be gone, forever. The spell on the ranger? That would remain. He had cast it well. It was part of her very essence now. But this was different. This was his. Something that had only surfaced because he needed it most. And if he had used it, if he chose to burn it all at once to seal the first god away, he would never be able to protect her like this again. Not with this power. Not with this strength. This was a one-time gift, a single chance. And once it was gone forever. The Trickster's Dilemma. Loki's breath was steady, but his mind was not. He saw the choice before him, and it was a cruel one. If he did nothing, the first god would slowly consume Strange from within, shape him into something new, something itself, and nothing could stop what would come next. But if Loki unleashed what lay inside him, the cost would be final. No second chances, no way to undo it, no way to reclaim it. He would still be Loki, still be a sorcerer, a trickster, a god. But this power, this piece of something deeper than himself, would be erased. And the next time she was in danger, he would not be able to protect her like this again. His jaw tightened. Because it wasn't really a choice at all, was it? He had already made it. The moment she had become part of his world, the moment she had called him by his name, the moment she had trusted him. He had already chosen. And now? Now he would pay the price. The sorcerer sees the truth. Strange saw it. He was still catching his breath, still stabilizing from the weight of what had nearly overtaken him. But he was no fool. He saw the tension in Loki's shoulder, the way his fingers twitched, the way his gaze darkened with something Strange had never seen before. Loki, always so smug, always so unreadable, always holding the upper hand, was hesitating. And Strange knew why. Because Loki had lied. Not with his words, but with his silence. Strange exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. You knew this would happen. Loki didn't deny it. You knew what this thing was all along. Again, no denial. Strange clenched his jaw. And you knew you have to be the one to stop it. Loki finally looked at him. And Strange, brilliant, stubborn, sharp-eyed Strange, saw the truth. Saw the choice that had already been made. Saw the cost that Loki had already accepted. And suddenly, he hated it. No! Loki arched a brow. No? You're not doing this. Loki tilted his head. Strange, you seem to be under the impression that you have a say in the matter. Strange stepped forward. I don't need to have a say, I just need to stop you. Loki chuckled, but there was no amusement in it. And how do you plan to do that, dear Sorcerer Supreme? Strange clenched his fists. You said this isn't a fight I can win, that I can't stop this thing. But if you use whatever the hell it is inside you, you won't be able to... Yes. The single word froze Strange in his place. Because Loki knew exactly what he was sacrificing. And he was doing it anyway. The end of something greater. Loki turned his face to the shifting void of the first god, the fractured reality it had already begun to rewrite, the slow press of something that should not be. And then he let go. His eyes glowed, not green, not golden, but something new, something ancient, something final. The magic unraveled from him, spilling out, coiling, shaping into something that could not be named, something that did not belong to any god, any realm, any history that had ever been written. And then he spoke the words that should not have existed, the words that were older than time, the words that had been waiting for him. And the universe shook. A single pulse rippled outwards. The first god screamed, not in rage, not in pain, but in realization, because it had never expected this. Never anticipated that something as small, as insignificant as the trickster god would have the power to stand against it. It fought, but it was too late. Loki had already sealed its fate. The void collapsed in on itself, twisting, bending, breaking apart at the seams of its own existence. And then, silence. The aftermath. The air was still. The universe had rebalanced itself. Strange staggered, his body barely holding itself together, after standing so close to something that should have never been woken. And when he looked up, Loki was on his knees. His hands were shaking, and Strange knew what had happened. Knew what it had cost. Knew that Loki had burned away something irreplaceable. Something that had once made him invincible. And now? Now he was just Loki again. The spell on the Ranger would hold, but never again would he be able to do what he had just done. His one chance had been used, and he had chosen to spend it. For her. The power that sleeps. The sanctuary was quiet, too quiet. Loki sat by the hearth, fingers absently running over the goblet of wine he had yet to drink, his emerald gaze lost in the flickering flames. The battle had been won, the first god was sealed. Strange had recovered, begrudgingly accepting that Loki had saved them both. But at a cost. And now? Now he was waiting, because he knew she would come. He knew she would ask, not because she was entitled to answers, but because she knew him too well to not see the truth. And Loki, clever, careful Loki, had not yet decided how much he was willing to tell. Not because he wanted to lie, but because he did not know the truth himself, because the power should have been gone. And yet, even now, he could feel it. Not burning, not thrumming beneath his skin as it had that moment, but dormant, waiting, as if it had only retreated, as if it had only gone back to sleep. The Ranger's silent understanding. The soft sound of footstep pulled him from his thoughts. Loki did not turn. He did not have to. He knew it was her. The Ranger stepped forward silently, her movements measured, careful, but not hesitant, not uncertain. She knew him too well for that, and when she finally spoke, it was not to demand answers. It was not to ask him why. It was only, "You look like you could use company." Loki huffed a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "Do I now?" She sat beside him, not too close, but close enough. She did not press, she did not question. That was why he had chosen her. Because she knew, she saw him, and she did not need to hear the words to understand what they meant. The weight of sacrifice. A long silence stretched between them. Then, softly, "You lost something." Loki's finger tightened around his goblet, just slightly. He let out a slow breath. "Yes." The Ranger nodded, as if she had already known. Was it worth it? A long pause. Then, yes. She tilted her head, studying him. "And will you tell me why?" Loki finally looked at her, his expression calm, his smirk faint. "I stumbled upon something ancient," he said smoothly. "Something that should have remained hidden. It was a power I could wield, but only once. And now, it's gone. A lie wrapped in a truth, because the power was not gone. Not entirely. But Loki did not control it. And he never had." The Ranger held his gaze for a long moment, searching. Loki waited. Waited for her to challenge him, to demand more. But instead, she only nodded. "Then that's enough for me." The power that waits. Loki blinked. She did not push, she did not press, she simply accepted it. Accepted him. Because she knew there was a deeper reason, and she did not need to hear it to trust that he had chosen well. Loki exhaled slowly, setting his goblet down, rolling his shoulder as if to shake off the weight of something unseen. "You are a strange creature," he murmured. The ranger smirked. "So are you." Loki chuckled, shaking his head. "That, my dear, is very true." They sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling softly, the air lighter than before. But deep within him, the power waited. Not gone, not lost, only dormant. Only asleep. Because it had never belonged to him. Not really. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to be used. And when that moment came again, it would decide. Not him, not fate, but the will of something greater. Because Loki had not taken this power. It had chosen him, and one day it would choose again. The warmth of home. The fire crackled softly, its golden light casting long shadows against the stone walls of Loki's sanctuary. The night had settled in, the waterfall outside whispering in the distance, the world finally still after the storm that had passed. Loki sat in his usual chair, one leg draped lazily over the armrest, his goblet of Asgardian wine resting on his knee. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. He was tired. Not in the way a mortal man might be after a long day, but in the way a god might be after wielding forces beyond even his understanding. The ranger saw it. Saw the way he carried it, this weight, this exhaustion that settled in his bones, in his very being. And tonight she would not let him carry it alone. A trickster's reluctance. "You are tense." Loki blinked, glancing at her from over the rim of his goblet. "Am I?" She arched a brow, crossing her arms. "Don't play coy with me, Loki, I can see it." He smirked, swirling the wine in his cup. "Perhaps I simply enjoy looking brooding and mysterious. Or perhaps you're terrible at hiding when something weighs on you." Loki's smirk faltered for half a second, barely noticeable. But the ranger caught it. He sighed dramatically, setting his goblet down. "Ah, you wound me, truly. Are you suggesting I'm incapable of deception?" "No," she said smoothly, stepping toward him. "I am suggesting that I know you too well for it to work on me." Loki chuckled, shaking his head. "You're insufferable. And you are tense." She placed her hands on his shoulders, fingers pressing lightly against the stiffness in his muscles. And that shut him up instantly. The trickster melts. Loki had faced battles, he had stood before celestial forces, defied gods, rewritten fate itself. But this was something else entirely. The moment her fingers dug in, working through the knots of tension that coiled beneath his skin, he had let out a slow breath, longer than he meant to. The ranger smirked. "Ah, so the great Loki does have weak spots." He hummed in response, his usual quick wit noticeably absent. She worked slowly, methodically, kneading the muscles at the base of his neck, moving up along his scalp, letting her fingers do their quiet magic. And Loki, for once in his life, let himself be still. "You carry too much," she murmured, her touch gentle but firm. "You always do." Loki exhaled slowly. "What else would you have me do?" "Let someone else carry it with you." His eyes flickered open just slightly, glancing at her. She met his gaze, and that was enough to silence whatever sharp remark had been forming on his lips, because she meant it. A simple pleasure. The massage lasted longer than she expected, not because she was trying to prolong it, but because Loki had not stopped her. His sharp tongue, his endless quips, his mischief, all of it had fallen silent beneath the slow, steady rhythm of her hands. And when she finally pulled away, Loki blinked as if waking from a dream. He rolled his shoulders, testing them, and let out a satisfied sigh. All right, I suppose I will allow you to do that again. The ranger smirked. Generous of you. Loki smirked in return. I'm known for my kindness. She nudged him lightly, rolling her eyes. Come on, food, then wine, then sleep. I won't let you argue. Bossy, Loki mused, standing to follow her. I rather like it. She chuckled, shaking her head as she led him towards the kitchen, the warmth of their shared moment lingering in the air like the embers of a dying fire. The taste of peace. Dinner was simple, hearty, warm. Loki ate without complaint, savoring the flavors, the comfort of it, the fact that for the first time in what felt like centuries, he did not have to be watching for an enemy lurking in the shadows. The Asgardian wine that followed was soothing, rich, and by the time they had settled in for the night, tucked beneath the heavy blankets, the weight of exhaustion had finally faded. The ranger rested her head against his shoulder, her warmth a steady presence, and Loki, trickster, liar, god of mischief, did not move, did not pull away, did not break the moment. He simply let it be. Because tonight there were no battles to fight, no wars to win, no gods to defy, only this, only her, and for now, that was enough.